You have a life that should feel fine, maybe even good. You have food, shelter, people around you. You probably have a phone with 1,000 ways to stay entertained. And yet, somewhere in the middle of all of it, there is this quiet feeling you cannot quite explain. Not sadness exactly, not depression, just emptiness. Like something important is missing, but you cannot name what it is. If you have ever felt that, this audiobook was made for you. Because that feeling is not a personal failure. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is actually one of the most common and least talked about experiences of modern life. And by the time you finish listening, you will understand exactly why it is happening, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. Chapter 1. The feeling nobody talks about honestly. There is a specific moment that a lot of people experience, but almost nobody describes out loud. It usually happens on an ordinary evening. You finish work. You eat something. You scroll through your phone for a while. Maybe you watch a show. And then, somewhere between one thing and the next, you just stop. And you sit there. And you think, is this it? Not in a dramatic way. Not in a crisis kind of way. Just a quiet, dull moment where life suddenly feels a little too flat. Too routine. Too empty of anything that genuinely matters. You are not alone in that moment. In fact, that experience is happening to millions of people every single day. And the strange part is that many of the people feeling it are doing well by every visible measure. They have jobs. They have relationships. They have comfortable lives. But comfort and fulfillment are not the same thing. And somewhere along the way, a lot of people started confusing one for the other. Here is what emotional emptiness actually is. It is not depression, though it can lead there if left unaddressed for long enough. It is not laziness. It is not ingratitude. It is something more specific. It is the feeling that comes when your daily life stops feeling connected to anything that genuinely matters to you. Think of it like this. Imagine you are eating a meal, but you cannot taste anything. You are going through all the physical motions of eating, but there is no flavor, no satisfaction. You finish the meal, and you do not feel nourished. That is what emotional emptiness is like. You are living. You are doing things. But the experience itself feels strangely thin. Like something got switched off somewhere, and you are not sure when or how. The reason this feeling is so common today has a lot to do with how modern life is actually structured. And that is what this audiobook is going to explore, step by step. Here is the key thing to understand before we go further. Emptiness is not random. It follows patterns. It has causes. And once you understand the causes clearly, it becomes much easier to do something useful about them. We are going to look at this from several angles. The way modern life rewires your brain. The way social media quietly damages your sense of self. The way busyness became a substitute for meaning. The way genuine connection has slowly been replaced with digital noise. And then, we are going to talk about what actually helps. But first, we need to understand something that most people miss entirely. The emptiness you feel is not your enemy. It is actually a signal. Your mind is trying to tell you something important. And learning to listen to it, instead of escaping it, is where everything starts to change. In the next chapter, we are going to look at the one thing modern life does to your brain that nobody warned you about. And once you see it clearly, a lot of things about your daily life will start to make a different kind of sense. Chapter 2. How modern life rewired your brain without permission. Your brain was not built for the world you are living in. That is not an insult. It is just a fact of biology. For most of human history, the brain evolved in an environment of limited stimulation. You had your immediate community. You had your physical surroundings. You had problems that were concrete and solvable. Find food, stay warm, maintain relationships with the people physically around you. The brain developed a system of rewards around these things. When you did something useful or meaningful, you felt a small release of satisfaction. That feeling was your signal to keep going. Now fast forward to today. In a single morning, you can check the news, scroll through hundreds of images of other people's lives, receive 20 notifications, watch a video, send several messages, read 3 articles, and check your social media likes. All before breakfast. Your brain is still using the same ancient reward system, but the inputs have completely changed. Every notification gives you a tiny hit of stimulation. Every scroll gives you the possibility of something surprising or interesting. Every like on a post gives you a small flicker of social validation. And your brain starts to adapt to this level of constant stimulation. Here is where the problem begins. When your brain gets used to constant high stimulation, ordinary life starts to feel flat by comparison. Quiet moments begin to feel uncomfortable. Sitting with a friend and having a real conversation feels slower and less immediately rewarding than scrolling through content. Reading a book feels harder to sustain. Even enjoyable activities like cooking or walking start to feel a little dull if there is not something to look at or listen to at the same time. This is not a personal weakness. It is a neurological adaptation. Your brain adjusted to constant input, and now it struggles to feel satisfied without it. The technical name for this pattern involves something called dopamine regulation, but you do not need to think about it in scientific terms. What you need to understand is the practical effect. When your brain becomes overstimulated by digital input, your baseline for what feels satisfying goes up. Small, quiet, genuine pleasures stop registering. The joy of a slow morning. The satisfaction of a completed task. The warmth of a good conversation. These things still exist, but they have been drowned out. The signal is still there. You just can no longer hear it clearly. This is one of the core reasons people feel empty even when they are technically doing a lot. They are consuming constantly, but absorbing very little. They are busy but not nourished. They are stimulated but not fulfilled. And the tragic irony is that the response to feeling empty is often to consume more. More scrolling, more content, more noise, which deepens the problem further. So what actually helps here? The answer is not dramatic. It is not about completely abandoning technology or going off the grid. It is about something much simpler. Deliberately introducing periods of low stimulation into your daily life. This means spending some time each day without background noise, without a screen, without input, even 10 to 15 minutes where you are just present in the physical space around you. Drinking your coffee without your phone, walking somewhere without headphones, sitting somewhere quiet, and allowing your thoughts to settle. This feels uncomfortable at first, almost impossibly uncomfortable for some people. That discomfort is actually important information. It tells you how deeply your brain has been conditioned to constant stimulation. But if you sit with it, instead of immediately filling the silence, something interesting starts to happen. Your brain begins to recalibrate. The quiet starts to feel less threatening. Small experiences start to feel more meaningful again. You are not broken. Your brain just needs room to breathe. But the overstimulation problem is only one piece of this. There is something else going on that cuts even deeper, something that has quietly changed the way people see themselves and their lives. And it is something most people participate in every day without realizing the cost. That is what comes next. Chapter 3. The comparison machine and what it does to your sense of self. Humans have always compared themselves to others. That is not new. But the scale and speed of comparison today is something entirely different from anything that existed before. For most of history, you compared yourself to people in your immediate environment. Your neighbors, your colleagues, your friends. That was the pool. And within that pool, comparison was somewhat manageable because you also knew the full picture of those people's lives. You knew their struggles. You knew their bad days. You saw them fully. Social media changed that in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. Now you are comparing yourself, every single day, to thousands of people, and not to their real lives. To the curated, edited, carefully selected highlights of their lives. The vacation photos, the promotion announcements, the beautiful meals, the happy relationships, the impressive achievements, the flat stomachs, the successful businesses. And your brain cannot fully distinguish between that curated highlight reel and reality. It processes those images as if they represent how those people actually live all the time. So you end up comparing your ordinary Tuesday, with all its mess and boredom and imperfection, to everyone else's best moments. And inevitably, you come out feeling like you are behind, like you are not doing enough, like your life is somehow smaller or less impressive than it should be. This is not a rational process. It is not something you can simply think your way out of by reminding yourself that social media is not real. The comparison still happens. The feeling still lands. And over time, it creates a persistent, low-level sense of inadequacy that is hard to shake. Here is what that actually looks like in daily life. You are having a perfectly good day. You feel okay. Then you open your phone for 5 minutes and see someone your age who has bought a house, or started a business, or is traveling somewhere beautiful. And suddenly your day feels smaller. Your progress feels insignificant. Your life, which was fine a moment ago, now feels like it is not enough. That shift happened in 5 minutes. And it is happening to almost everyone, multiple times a day, without most people fully recognizing the cumulative damage it is doing. The emotional result of constant comparison is not just dissatisfaction. It is something more like a quiet erosion of self-trust. Because when you are always measuring yourself against other people's curated best moments, you stop trusting your own experience of your own life. You stop being able to assess your own progress on its own terms. You need external validation to feel okay, and even when you get it, it does not last, because the next comparison is always one scroll away. So what actually helps with this? The most effective thing is not motivational advice about loving yourself. That does not work for most people. What works is something more practical. The first thing is reducing exposure. Not eliminating it necessarily, but choosing specific times to check social media rather than doing it automatically throughout the day. When you reduce the frequency of comparison, you reduce its emotional impact. The second thing is deliberately anchoring yourself to your own progress. At the end of each day, ask yourself one simple question. What did I do today that moved something forward, even a little? It does not have to be impressive. It just has to be honest. Because the antidote to comparing yourself to other people is to become more interested in your own trajectory. The third thing is recognizing that comparison is almost never accurate. You are comparing your internal experience, which includes all your doubts and fears and setbacks, to someone else's external presentation, which shows none of those things. It is not a fair comparison. It never was. But there is something even more interesting happening beneath all of this. And it explains why people keep going back to the thing that hurts them. Why they keep scrolling even when they know it makes them feel worse. That pattern has a name. And understanding it changes everything. Chapter 4. The validation loop and why it is never enough. There is a reason people check their phone immediately after posting something. And then check it again. And then again a few minutes later. It is not vanity. Or rather, it is not just vanity. It is something the brain does automatically and quite powerfully. It is looking for confirmation that it is okay. That it matters. That other people see it and approve of what they see. This is called the validation loop. And it is one of the most quietly draining patterns in modern life. Here is how it works in practice. You post something. A photo, a thought, an update. And then you wait. And while you wait, there is a kind of low-level anxiety. Will people respond? Will they like it? When the notification comes, there is a brief moment of relief. A small hit of reassurance. And then, very quickly, it fades. The relief does not last. It never lasts. So you are back where you started, needing the next confirmation. The deeper issue is that when your sense of being okay becomes dependent on external responses, your internal sense of self starts to hollow out. You stop being able to feel good about yourself based on your own assessment. You need the outside world to tell you first. Think about how much of daily behavior is quietly organized around this need. People share things they think will get positive reactions, not necessarily things that are true or meaningful to them. People do not say what they actually think in conversations because they are monitoring for approval. People dress differently around different groups of people. People avoid being honest about their real feelings because they are not sure the feelings will be received well. All of this is a version of the same thing. A constant, exhausting management of how other people perceive you. And the cost is your connection to your own actual experience. When you spend most of your energy managing how you appear to others, you have very little energy left for the experience of actually being yourself. And that disconnection from your own inner life is a significant source of the emptiness many people feel. There is a simple exercise that helps with this, and it requires almost nothing. At least once a day, do something that no one will ever see. Cook a meal without photographing it. Go for a walk without posting about it. Write something just for yourself. Spend time in a way that is entirely for your own experience, with no audience. This sounds almost too simple. But for many people, it is genuinely difficult. Because they have become so used to experiencing their life through the lens of how it will appear to others that they have forgotten how to experience it directly. The more time you spend doing things purely for your own enjoyment or growth, without any external documentation or validation, the stronger your internal sense of self becomes. You start to recalibrate. You start to know what you actually enjoy versus what you enjoy because it gets good responses. Those two things are often very different. And that gap, between who you actually are and who you perform for others, is one of the quieter causes of emotional emptiness that almost no one talks about. But the emptiness has another major source that is even more insidious, because it is not just about phones and social media. It goes deeper than that. It lives in the very structure of how most people spend their time. In the way modern life quietly convinced everyone that being busy is the same as having purpose. That is where we are going next. Chapter 5. The Busyness Trap. When being busy becomes a way to avoid yourself. Here is a question worth sitting with. When was the last time you did absolutely nothing? Not scrolling, not listening to something, not planning or thinking through your to-do list. Just nothing. For most people in the modern world, the honest answer is, they cannot remember. And that is not something most people see as a problem. In fact, busyness is often worn as a badge of importance. When someone asks how you are doing, saying busy carries a kind of status. It signals that you are in demand, that your time is valuable, that you are doing things that matter. But here's the problem. Busyness and meaning are not the same thing. And a huge number of people are extremely busy doing things that do not actually fulfill them at all. There is a pattern that becomes clear when you talk to people honestly about how they spend their time. Most of them are exhausted. Not the good kind of tired that comes from building something meaningful or connecting with people they love. The hollow kind of tired. The kind that comes from constant motion that never seems to lead anywhere that actually matters. They work all day, often at tasks that feel disconnected from any larger purpose. They come home and immediately fill the quiet with screens. They spend their weekends catching up on things they could not get to during the week. And somewhere in all of that, the actual life they want to be living, the life with depth and connection and genuine enjoyment, keeps getting postponed. Tomorrow they will rest. Next month things will slow down. Next year they will do the things that matter. And the years pass. And the things that matter stay on the list. The busyness trap is particularly difficult to escape because it is reinforced by culture. Society genuinely does reward people who appear productive. Resting is often described as laziness. Taking time for yourself is called selfish. Slowing down is treated like a failure of ambition. So people keep going. Faster and faster. And the emptiness grows alongside the schedule. Here is what actually happens psychologically when you are chronically busy without real purpose. Your brain enters a kind of survival mode. It is always processing the next task, the next obligation, the next thing that needs to get done. This constant task orientation actually blocks access to deeper emotional processing. It blocks your ability to reflect, to feel what you feel, to hear what your own life is telling you. This is why so many people describe the emptiness as hitting them hardest when things slow down. On vacation, on a Sunday morning, in the brief silence before sleep. Because those are the moments when the busyness stops, and there is nothing left between them and the quiet voice underneath all the noise. And that voice is uncomfortable to hear, because it tends to ask questions like, is this what I wanted? Is this the life I meant to be living? The solution is not to stop being productive. It is to become more intentional about what you are being productive toward. Ask yourself, honestly, what percentage of your daily activities actually align with what you value most? Not what you are supposed to value. Not what looks good to others. What you genuinely, personally care about. For many people, when they do this honestly, the number is surprisingly small. They are spending 80 or 90% of their time on obligations and automatic habits, and maybe 10% on the things that actually make life feel worth living. You cannot fix that overnight, but you can start to shift the ratio. Slowly, deliberately, by protecting small amounts of time each day for the things that genuinely nourish you. Not for productivity, not for performance, just for the experience of being a person who actually enjoys their own life. And there is something that makes this even more urgent. Because the busyness trap does not just steal your time. It steals your relationships. And the damage to those relationships is one of the deepest and least recognized sources of the emptiness epidemic. Chapter 6. The loneliness you cannot name when you are never alone. Something strange is happening to human connection. People are more technically connected than at any point in history. They have hundreds of contacts in their phone. They communicate throughout the day. They have followers and friends in group chats. And yet, a growing number of people describe feeling profoundly lonely. Not the obvious kind of lonely, where you are physically isolated from other people. A different, more confusing kind. A loneliness that exists alongside an active social life. A loneliness that happens even in a room full of people. a loneliness that comes from having many interactions but very few genuine ones. This is the loneliness of surface connection, and it is one of the most significant contributors to emotional emptiness today. Here is the difference between a surface connection and a real one. In a surface connection, you share information. You discuss events, schedules, opinions, things that happened. You interact pleasantly, and then you leave, and nothing meaningful was exchanged. The interaction was real, but it did not touch anything important. It did not reach into anything vulnerable or true about either person. In a genuine connection, something different happens. You feel seen, not for your accomplishments or your appearance or the version of yourself you present publicly, but for something truer than that. The things you are uncertain about, the feelings you carry quietly, the experiences that shaped you. When you are genuinely seen, you feel less alone in the world. And that feeling, even briefly, is one of the most deeply nourishing experiences available to human beings. The problem is that modern life makes surface connection extremely easy and genuine connection extremely rare. It is easy to text someone. It is much harder to sit with them in silence and let the conversation go somewhere real. It is easy to respond with a laughing emoji. It is much harder to say, honestly, that you are struggling with something. It is easy to maintain a social media friendship with hundreds of people. It is much harder to build the kind of trust that allows you to say what you actually feel. So people collect connections without really having them. They are surrounded by people who do not truly know them. And that gap between being seen and being recognized creates a specific kind of loneliness that is very hard to put into words. Here is what makes this particularly painful. Many people blame themselves for this. They assume that if they were more interesting or more likable or more open, they would have deeper connections. But the reality is that most people around them are feeling the exact same thing. Everyone is waiting for someone else to go first. Everyone is holding back, managing how they appear, afraid of being rejected or judged if they reveal something real. So what can you actually do about this? The first step is simply recognizing the problem honestly. Most people do not admit, even to themselves, that they are lonely, because loneliness carries shame in a culture that equates popularity with worth. But naming it clearly and accepting it without judgment is the starting point. The second step is being willing to go a little deeper in at least one or two relationships. Not dramatically, not by overwhelming someone with personal revelations, just by allowing one real question into a conversation. How are you actually doing lately? Not as a formality, but as a genuine inquiry. And then staying in the conversation long enough to hear an honest answer. The third step is consistency. Genuine connection is not built in single conversations. It is built through repeated presence, showing up reliably for the people you care about, not just in emergencies or big moments. In the ordinary, everyday moments that seem small but are actually the fabric of real relationships. Depth is not something you find. It is something you build over time, with people who are willing to do it alongside you. But there is still something missing from this picture. Because even people who have good relationships sometimes feel empty. And that emptiness points to something more internal. Something about purpose and meaning and the deep human need to feel that your existence is pointed towards something that matters. That is what the next chapter is about. Chapter 7. The Meaning Gap. What happens when life has no direction that feels real? Here is a truth that is easy to say and surprisingly difficult to sit with. Human beings need a sense of meaning. Not luxury. Not entertainment. Not comfort. Meaning. The feeling that what you are doing with your time and energy matters in some way that goes beyond the immediate moment. This is not a new idea, but it is one that modern culture has quietly made harder to act on. For most of human history, meaning was somewhat built into the structure of daily life. People were embedded in communities with shared values and shared work. The things they did were clearly connected to outcomes that mattered, feeding their family, contributing to their community, passing something on to the next generation. The connection between action and meaning was direct and visible. Modern life has, in many ways, severed that connection. A lot of people spend their working hours doing tasks that feel far removed from anything they care about. They produce reports that they suspect no one will fully read. They attend meetings that could have been emails. They work toward targets set by someone else, for goals they were not part of choosing, in service of a company whose success they feel no real emotional investment in. They go home, and the leisure they use to recover from the meaninglessness of work is often more consumption, shows, games, scrolling. Passive entertainment that provides distraction but no sense of accomplishment or direction. And slowly, without quite noticing how it happened, they arrive at that quiet evening moment. The is this it moment. The feeling that life is moving past without being fully inhabited. The meaning gap is the distance between how you are actually spending your time and energy and what you actually care about. The wider that gap, the emptier life tends to feel. Now, this does not mean everyone needs to have a grand purpose or a world-changing mission. That framing actually makes things worse for most people because it sets a bar so high that ordinary life can never clear it. The meaning that most people need is not epic. It is personal, and it is usually much smaller and more accessible than people expect. Meaning comes from feeling that your actions are connected to something you genuinely value. That could be your family, your craft, your community, your growth, your creativity, your care for other people. It does not need to be impressive from the outside. It just needs to be real from the inside. A practical way to start reconnecting with meaning is to ask yourself a very specific question. Not, what is my purpose? That question tends to paralyze people. Instead, ask, what is something I would do even if no one was watching, and even if nothing came of it, because the act of doing it feels right? That answer, whatever it is pointing towards something genuine. It might be very small, making things with your hands, helping a specific person, learning something that has no practical application, taking care of a living thing, writing something no one will read. These small, genuine interests are the seeds of real meaning. They deserve more of your time and attention than most people give them. The other important thing about meaning is this. It is not found. It is created through commitment and attention and showing up repeatedly to the things you care about, even when it is inconvenient or imperfect. People who feel most alive are not people who discovered some secret purpose. They are people who made a decision to invest themselves fully in something that mattered to them, and then did the work of that investment consistently over time. But here is something that complicates all of this. Even when you understand meaning intellectually, there is a force that keeps pulling you away from it. A force that lives not outside you, but inside you. A voice that says, not yet. Wait, you are not ready. Things need to be better first. That voice has a name, and it is responsible for more lost potential than almost anything else. Chapter 8. The never good enough feeling and the pressure that never lets up. There is a message that modern society transmits constantly and almost invisibly. It goes like this: you should be further along by now. You should be more successful, more organized, more fit, more financially secure, more disciplined, more impressive, more healed, more productive, more fulfilled. No matter what you have done, there is always more that you have not done. No matter where you are, there is always somewhere more advanced you should be. The goalpost is always just beyond where you are standing. This is not a new human experience. The desire to improve is natural and often healthy. But the version of it that most people are living with today is not really about improvement. It is something closer to chronic self-rejection. Chronic self-rejection is the pattern of being unable to feel genuinely okay about yourself in the present moment because you are always measuring yourself against an ideal that does not exist. The fully optimized version of you that has solved all your problems, broken all your bad habits, built all your good ones, and achieved everything you have ever set out to do. That version of you will never arrive. Not because you are failing, but because that version is not a destination. It is a moving horizon. The closer you get, the further it moves. The cost of living in constant pursuit of this moving horizon is significant. It creates a baseline tension that never fully relaxes. It makes the present moment feel insufficient by definition. It turns every achievement into a brief stop before the next inadequacy becomes visible. And it contributes directly to emotional emptiness. Because when you are never enough, your life never feels like enough either. Everything you have done and experienced and built feels insufficient when measured against the impossible standard you are holding yourself to. Here is something worth really understanding. The feeling of not being enough is not information about reality. It is a habit of mind. And like all habits, it can be changed. Not by telling yourself everything is perfect, because that is not true either, but by developing a different relationship with your own progress. The practical shift here is moving from a perfection-based mindset to a direction-based one. Instead of asking yourself whether you are where you should be, ask whether you are moving in the direction of where you want to go. That is a completely different question, and it has a much more honest and useful answer most of the time. Direction is something most people can truthfully say yes to, even on difficult days. You are not perfect, but you are learning something. You are building something. You are getting clearer about something. That forward movement, however imperfect and slow, is real, and it deserves to be recognized as real. The other thing that helps is separating your worth from your productivity. Your value as a person does not fluctuate with your output. You are not more worthy of rest, connection, or enjoyment when you have achieved more. You are worthy of those things as a starting point, not as a reward. That reframe sounds simple, but for most people who grew up being praised for achievement and performance, it takes real practice. It means intentionally resting without justifying the rest. It means experiencing enjoyment without earning it first. It means allowing yourself to simply exist without producing something. And all of this connects to something that almost no one talks about honestly: the relationship between all this pressure and your mental and emotional health. Because the effects of living under chronic pressure go much deeper than most people acknowledge. Chapter 9. The Hidden Weight. What emotional suppression actually costs you. Most people were never taught how to handle their emotions. They were taught how to manage them, how to suppress them, how to keep them out of sight. From a very early age, many people received clear messages about which feelings were acceptable and which were not. Sadness was weakness. Anger was dangerous. Fear was embarrassing. Loneliness was shameful. Uncertainty was something to be hidden. The acceptable feelings were the pleasant ones: happiness, enthusiasm, confidence. So people learned to push the difficult feelings down, to keep functioning, to present the acceptable version of themselves to the world. And for a while, this seems to work. The problem is that emotions do not actually disappear when they are suppressed. They accumulate. They find other ways of expressing themselves, sometimes as physical symptoms: tension, fatigue, headaches, sleep problems. Sometimes as sudden and disproportionate reactions to small things. And sometimes as a persistent, low-level numbness, which is the psyche's way of managing an overload of feelings it was never given permission to process. That numbness is another face of emotional emptiness. It is not the absence of feelings. It is the result of too many feelings being held down for too long. The system eventually stops registering things clearly. Everything starts to feel muffled, flat, distant. A lot of people describe this as feeling like they are watching their own life from behind glass. Present but not really there. Going through the motions without being genuinely in them. This is one of the more disorienting experiences that emotional suppression can create. So what does emotional processing actually look like in practice? Because for most people, the idea of processing your emotions sounds like something vague that happens in therapy. And while therapy is genuinely helpful for many people, you do not need a therapist to begin the process of becoming more emotionally aware and honest. The simplest and most accessible practice is also one of the least comfortable. It is the practice of allowing yourself to feel what you actually feel, without immediately trying to fix it, explain it away, or distract yourself from it. This means when you feel sad, not immediately scrolling to escape the feeling. When you feel anxious, not immediately distracting yourself with activity. When you feel lonely, not immediately reaching for your phone. Instead, just sitting with the feeling for a few minutes. Naming it. Acknowledging that it is real. This is harder than it sounds because of conditioning. Most people have spent years learning to move away from uncomfortable feelings as quickly as possible. Slowing down and turning toward them feels counterintuitive. But here is what actually happens when you practice this over time. The feelings pass more quickly, not because you are suppressing them, but because you are actually letting them move through. Emotions that are allowed to exist do not tend to last as long as emotions that are being fought or suppressed. They peak and then subside, like waves. But only if you stop trying to hold them under. Journaling is one of the most practical tools for this. Not structured, goal-oriented journaling. Just writing what you actually feel, without editing it for an audience. You can burn it or delete it afterward. The point is not the product. The point is the act of giving your inner experience somewhere to go. Honest conversation with people you trust is another powerful form of emotional processing. Not venting, which tends to amplify feelings rather than process them. but genuine sharing. Saying to someone, "I have been feeling something lately, and I am not entirely sure what to do with it," and then talking it through. The goal is not to eliminate difficult emotions. The goal is to stop carrying them alone, in silence, until the weight becomes part of what makes everyday life feel heavy. There is something else that contributes enormously to this heaviness, and it has to do with attention. Specifically, with what happens to your mind when attention becomes something you can no longer control. That is the next chapter. Chapter 10. Attention is the new currency, and most people are spending it without knowing. There is a simple but powerful idea that changes how most people think about their daily lives once they really absorb it. Where your attention goes, your life goes. Not in a mystical sense. In a very literal, practical sense. Your experience of being alive is made up entirely of what you pay attention to. The quality of your relationships depends on how much genuine attention you give to the people in them. The quality of your work depends on your capacity to direct focused attention at the things that matter. The quality of your inner life depends on what you allow your attention to dwell on. Attention is not just a resource. It is the fundamental medium of your experience. And something is happening to that attention in the modern world that most people have not fully reckoned with. The digital environment was designed, deliberately and expensively, to capture and hold your attention as continuously as possible. Every app, every platform, every notification system was engineered by teams of very smart people whose entire job was to make their product more compelling than anything else you might choose to do with your time. The result is that most people have lost a significant degree of control over their own attention. Not because they are weak-willed, but because they are up against systems specifically designed to exploit the exact vulnerabilities of human psychology. The need for novelty, the pull of social information, the anxiety of possibly missing something, the reward of intermittent validation. Here is what fragmented attention does to the experience of life. When your attention is constantly interrupted, you lose the ability to engage deeply with anything. You start skimming the surface of everything. You watch a movie while checking your phone. You have a conversation while thinking about what you want to look at next. You do your work in short bursts between notifications. You read a few paragraphs before your hand moves automatically to the phone. Everything becomes partial. Nothing gets your full presence. And the consequence of never being fully present is that nothing feels fully real or fully satisfying. You are there, but you are never quite there. And over time, that fragmentation becomes your default mode. You actually lose access to the deeper, more satisfying states of engagement that made activities feel genuinely meaningful. The concept of being fully absorbed in something, what some people call being in the zone, where time disappears and what you are doing feels completely engaging, that state becomes increasingly inaccessible. And that loss is significant because those states of full engagement are some of the most reliable sources of genuine satisfaction in human experience. Rebuilding your capacity for sustained attention is one of the most valuable things you can do for your quality of life. And the good news is that it is not complicated. It just requires deliberate practice. The practice is this: choose one thing and give it your complete attention for a set period of time. Not 10 seconds. A real period. 20 minutes. 30. An hour if you can manage it. Read without your phone nearby. Have a conversation without checking anything. Work on a single task without switching tabs. Cook a meal without background entertainment. At first, this will feel genuinely difficult. Your attention will want to scatter. The pull toward checking something or switching to something else will be strong. That pull is normal. It is the product of conditioning. But every time you stay with the single thing, you are reconditioning your brain. You are rebuilding its ability to go deep rather than constantly skimming. And as that capacity returns, life starts to feel different, more real, more present, more satisfying, because you are actually there for it. But there is one more layer to this that matters enormously. Because you can rebuild your attention, reconnect with meaning, process your emotions, and limit comparison, and still feel an unnamed resistance to genuine change. That resistance has deep roots, and understanding them is the key to making any of this stick long-term. Chapter 11. Why Change is Hard. The Comfort of Familiar Unhappiness. Here is something that sounds strange until you actually think about it. People often find the life they have more comfortable than the life they want, even when the life they have is making them unhappy. This is not irrationality. It is a deeply human pattern that has a very clear explanation. Your current life, even with all its problems, is known territory. You know how it works. You know what to expect. You know what your days look like and what your struggles are and how to navigate them. There is a kind of psychological safety in familiarity, even when the familiar thing is not good. Change, on the other hand, is unknown territory. Even positive change involves a period of uncertainty and discomfort. You are no longer in the known environment. You do not know what to expect. The old strategies may not work, and your brain, which is wired first and foremost to keep you safe, reads uncertainty as danger. So it resists. And it does not resist obviously by saying, "I am afraid of change." It resists in subtle ways. Procrastination, distraction, suddenly finding other priorities, telling yourself that now is not the right time, telling yourself you need to prepare more first, telling yourself you will start after this next busy period ends. This pattern is sometimes called comfortable misery. The misery is real, but so is the comfort of knowing what to expect from it. Understanding this pattern is important because it reframes the difficulty of change. It means the obstacle is not lack of motivation, or lack of information, or lack of ability. The obstacle is the brain's automatic preference for the known over the unknown. And that is a very different problem to solve. The way through it is not willpower. Willpower is finite and unreliable. The way through it is reducing the unknown, making the new behavior small enough and familiar enough that the brain does not register it as threatening. This is why small steps matter so much more than big dramatic resolutions. A big dramatic resolution feels like a leap into unknown territory. The brain resists it immediately. A small, concrete, daily action is just a slight variation on the current routine. The brain can handle that. If you want to spend less time scrolling, the resolution is not, "I will delete all my social media apps." That feels enormous and threatening. The action is, "I will not check my phone in the first hour after waking." That is small enough to actually do. If you want to build more genuine connection, the resolution is not, "I will transform my social life." The action is, "I will have one honest conversation this week with one person I care about." If you want to reconnect with meaning, the resolution is not, "I will redesign my entire life around my values." The action is, "I will spend 30 minutes this week doing the one thing I always feel better after doing." Small, concrete, consistent. These are the actual ingredients of change. Not insight, not motivation, not the right circumstances. Consistent, small action. And the more consistently you act, the more the new behavior becomes familiar. The more familiar it becomes, the less threatening it feels. The less threatening it feels, the easier it gets. And gradually, what required effort becomes what is natural. Chapter 12. The small life that actually feels large, rebuilding from the inside out. One of the most liberating realizations you can come to is this: you do not need a bigger life. You need a more present one. The cultural narrative says that fulfillment is found in scale. Bigger achievements, wider audiences, more experiences, more success, more impact. And so people spend their lives trying to scale up, believing that if they can just get to a certain level, the emptiness will fill itself. It does not. The evidence of this is everywhere. People who have achieved extraordinary things by any external measure still report the is-this-it feeling. Still lie awake wondering if their life means what they hoped it would. Still feel, in quiet moments, that something is missing. This is not because achievement is meaningless. It is because the relationship between external achievement and internal fulfillment is much weaker than culture suggests. External achievements can add to a fulfilling life, but they cannot create one from scratch. The foundation has to be built from something else. That something else is what we might call richness of attention. The ability to be genuinely present to ordinary moments in a way that makes them feel real and meaningful and worth having. A meal eaten slowly, with real attention to the taste of it and the person across the table. A conversation that goes somewhere honest. A walk in which you actually notice your surroundings instead of moving through them on autopilot. A morning where you sit quietly for a few minutes before the day begins and feel, just briefly, that everything is okay. These are small experiences, but they are the actual fabric of a life that feels worth living. Not because they are impressive, because they are real, because they involve your genuine presence rather than your managed performance. because they nourish you in the specific way that only actual experience can. Rebuilding from the inside out means starting here, not with grand goals or dramatic changes, with small, genuine moments of real presence in your own life. Here is a practical structure that many people find genuinely useful. The morning anchor. Before you look at your phone, before you engage with the world, spend 5 to 10 minutes doing something that is entirely for yourself. It might be sitting with a drink and watching the light change. It might be writing 3 lines in a journal. It might be stretching or standing outside for a moment, or simply breathing with intention. This brief practice, done consistently, creates a sense of intentional ownership over your own day. You start it by choice rather than by reaction. The meaningful hour. Once a week, or ideally more often, protect a block of time for something you genuinely enjoy that has nothing to do with productivity or performance. Something you would do even if no one ever knew about it. This is the time that reminds you who you are outside of your roles and obligations. The honest conversation. At least once a week, have a conversation with someone in which you go below the surface. Not necessarily about big problems, just below the level of information exchange. How are you really feeling lately? What are you thinking about these days? What has been hard? What has been good? These conversations are what genuine connection is actually made of. The digital boundary. Choose at least one part of your day that is reliably screen-free. Not forever, not dramatically, just one protected zone. Morning, evening, meal times. Wherever fits your life. Use that time for something that exists in physical reality rather than digital space. The compassionate check-in. Once a day, ask yourself a simple question. What do I actually need right now? Not what should I be doing? Not what do other people expect? What do I need? And then, wherever possible, give yourself a version of that. Even small. These practices are not solutions in the sense of fixing everything. They are habits of reconnection. Each one is a small vote cast in favor of your own genuine experience over the performance of your life. And as they accumulate, they gradually shift what everyday life feels like. The emptiness does not vanish overnight, but it becomes less total. There are more moments of genuine presence, more moments of real connection, more moments where life feels inhabited rather than merely observed. And those moments, slowly, expand. But there is one more thing. One final perspective that ties everything together. And it might be the most important one, because it is about how you see yourself in the context of all of this. Not the ideal version of yourself that should be doing better. The actual version. The one here, right now, trying to navigate a world that is genuinely difficult to navigate. Chapter 13. Coming home to yourself. The only place fulfillment actually lies. There is an image that helps explain something important. Imagine a person who has been traveling for a very long time. Not traveling for pleasure. The restless kind of traveling, where you are always moving because stopping feels dangerous. Always looking for the next destination that will finally feel like the right place. Always moving towards something that seems like it will be better than here. Most people live emotionally like that traveler. Always arriving somewhere only to discover that the arrival does not fix the feeling. Always looking outward for something that can only be found by turning inward. The emptiness you have been feeling is not a sign that you are in the wrong place. It is a sign that you have been away from yourself for a while. And everything this audiobook has explored, the overstimulation, the comparison, the validation seeking, the busyness, the suppressed emotions, the fragmented attention, all of it, is essentially a form of being away from yourself. Of living in a way that is responsive to everything external while losing touch with what is internal. Coming home to yourself is not a dramatic event. It is not a revelation that happens all at once. It is a gradual process of returning, of choosing again and again to pay attention to your own actual experience rather than the noise around it, of choosing to feel what you feel rather than escape it, of choosing to spend time in ways that genuinely matter to you rather than in ways that are convenient or impressive. It is also, importantly, a process of accepting where you are right now, not as a permanent destination, but as the real and legitimate starting point for wherever you are going next. You are not behind. You are here. That is different from being behind. You are not failing because you feel empty sometimes. You are human, navigating a world that is genuinely difficult to navigate, that pulls you in 100 directions simultaneously, that tells you constantly that you are not enough, that has flooded your nervous system with more stimulation than it was built to handle. Feeling depleted in that environment is not weakness. It is a reasonable response to genuinely difficult conditions. The question is not what is wrong with you. The question is, what do you need to reconnect with what is real and genuine in your own life? And the answer to that question is simpler than most people expect. Less noise, more presence, fewer comparisons, more honest connection, less performance, more genuine experience, less escape, more willingness to feel what is actually there. None of these things are complicated in principle. They are difficult in practice, in a world that is designed to pull you away from all of them constantly, which means they require not a one-time effort, but an ongoing commitment. A daily, small, repeated choice to come back to yourself. To be here, in this life, in this moment, as this person, instead of somewhere else entirely. That choice, made consistently, is what changes everything. Not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, the way a plant grows. You cannot see it happening day to day, but when you look back across the months, the difference is undeniable. Here is the truth that this entire audiobook has been working toward. The feeling of emptiness is not your enemy. It is your compass. It is the part of you that has not given up, that still knows the difference between living fully and going through the motions, that still wants something real, something genuine, something worth having. And the fact that you can still feel it, even through all the noise and distraction and pressure, means that what matters most has not been lost. It has just been waiting, patiently, for you to slow down enough to hear it. So slow down, just a little, just enough. Come home to yourself. That is where everything worth having has been all along. Thank you for listening. Start there, with one thing, and let the rest follow.